Do some heat treating. Just a little wonky right here at the very tip, but I left enough meat to where I'll be able to grind that out. Let's go ahead and get this thing finished. I'll sand the flats first, and then I'll resand these bevels, or grind I should say, on the grinder, and then I'll go to hand sand. This side, you know, the jacket material moved all the way up, and this side's all Damascus, which is pretty cool. Then we're gonna have a black core right here. Okay guys, we're going to introduce several new handle materials today. I give you C-Tech. This is a really interesting handle material. These are metal honeycombs that are filled with an epoxy resin, and they could be multiple different colors. They could be solid colors or swirly colors. I have purple, blue, and green here. It's pretty cool stuff. We're going to work with that and tell you about it, tell you the pros and cons, some things that I find with working with it. And then I'm introducing Detroit agate. This is Fordite. Fordite comes from the auto manufacturing plants. This is actually paint that builds up in the paint booths over doing multiple batches of cars. I'm going to be experimenting a lot with this Fordite. I think it's an amazing material. It's really unique. They go in and they chip the paint out. You know, it's baked, it's a hard enamel. This stuff is super hard, it polishes up really, really well. It's called either Detroit agate or Fordite. Really cool stuff. So I'm going to pair these two together on this Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde knife that I'm making. I think they'll make a nice pair. Since this has a lot of blue in it, I'm going to run with the blue C-Tech, made it up for my bolsters, and it's going to flow right into this Fordite. So far on the C-Tech, I'm making my bolsters here. This stuff works incredibly easy. It works really well. It grinds well. I will say this, when you get into the real edges of a pocket, it's very easy for the epoxy to chip out. So I would say when you're getting down to your final lines, you're going to want to move up to your highest grip belt and work it really slowly and not add a lot of pressure, because you don't want to knock that out, or else you'll have a uneven edge right on your line. So really interesting material. I'm going to go ahead and do this handle a little bit differently. I'm going to glue the bolsters on first, and then I'm going to go back and get that Detroit agate to line up to the back of this, and then we'll get that glued on. So we'll go ahead and do this first. Got all my pieces laid out. I'm going to go ahead and mix my epoxy and stick these on here and get them clamped up and lined out where I want. I did put a reference line on the blade to where when I put these on there, I can line them up and make sure that they're absolutely perfect. And then I'll clean the glue line here and I'll clean the glue line there and let it set up. And then I'll go ahead and section the rear handle scales up to this bolster after I'm done with letting this set up. Brr, it's chilly in the shop today. Alright, but here we are. We got the Fordite, Detroit agate, right there, the Detroit agate Fordite. Super cool stuff. I went ahead and cut this forward angle that's going to match up to my bolsters. I'm going to set it on the drill press, drill my holes. We're going to get this glued up. Are you ready for this? Super cool. Look at that Fordite. Man, that Fordite came out nice. And this isn't even in the cool side, guys. You ready? This is the hide side. Here's the Dr. Jekyll. Oh yeah. So, we have the Damascus peeking through up here. We got the 1084 layer. We got the 15 and 20 layer up high. We got this jewelry grade Fordite right here. Really cool. I mean, just came out phenomenal. Everything about it. This was a happy accident, guys. You know, I started out doing a Go My billet, which was 5 layers. I ended up with 3 layers. And I've got a lot of stuff to talk to you guys about. I want to go over what it was like using the Fordite, what it was like using the C-Tech, and some things that I had to take into consideration while heat treating this, because these 3 different layers are all different types of metal, so the heat treatment process was fairly difficult on this knife, and I'll tell you some of the hurdles that I had to overcome with that. First things first, let's talk about the heat treatment. I knew going into heat treating this knife that there was a very high potential that I could have warping. Mainly because I had 3 different materials that would quench at different rates. I had, you know, my original plan was to have a Damascus core with 2 layers of 1084 on the outside of that core and then 2 layers of 15 and 20. Now, because the layers were stacked evenly in a 5-layer billet, the heat treatment process would have gone pretty smoothly. However, I had 2 layers that did not weld that I peeled off. So then I was left with Damascus on one side, 1084 in the middle, and 15 and 20 on the right side. And because those metals would quench at different rates, they're slightly different, and they're not even, I had a feeling that this was going to warp on me. And it did. So here's what I did. I heated this, I rapidly quenched it, and then I plate quenched it in my vise. Now, the plate quenching kept all of the flat part of the knife straight, but the unsupported tip of the knife bent over. It definitely took on a slight warp. Because I knew that this knife would probably warp, when I did my rough grind, I left it really thick. That way I would have enough room in the material to scribe a new center line and grind to the center line to keep everything straight. And that's exactly what happened. I actually had to remove about 1/4 inch of the tip because my center line went off of the tip. The tip curved over so much that on the center line I couldn't get the tip to line up, so I had to reduce the tip by about 1/4 inch and reprofile this to get it to fit within the piece of material that was straight. Once again, you gotta roll with the punches, guys. You know, I mean, you could have thrown this out or you could finish it. And this knife turned out awesome. Okay, let's move on to the handle materials. The C-Tech material. It works incredibly easy. It grinds easily, it drills easily. The one problem that I found with the C-Tech, and I'm gonna show you. Let me jump up here real close. The one problem that I found with the C-Tech. Okay, you see how these are little honeycomb capillaries? Well, when you cut a radius or something into it, you have a small piece of a capillary left. You can see right there, I had a tiny piece. and the resin flaked out of there. You have to be really careful when you're sanding this, because even this one or this one, if I sanded with rough sandpaper in this direction, the paper could catch that and yank it out of there. So what I did find out, if you're going to use this C-Tech material on the edges, it's best to take your sandpaper and go into the edge. That way you're not trying to drag any of the epoxy out of that mesh material. Okay, that's the one thing that I noticed on the C-Tech. And then we moved on to the Fordite. The Fordite, that's an amazing material. That comes from the auto manufacturers. You know, the overspray builds up in the paint booths, and then every year or so they go in and they chip it all out. So think about it. These are all different paint colors that they use to paint cars with. Super cool. It is baked, so it's a baked enamel, and you can polish it really well, as you can see here. Now, the finishing process that I did is the same for this as this. I just took it to a high grit sandpaper, and then I buffed it with a buffing compound. I used Mother's on this, but you could easily use some micro mesh pads or a buffing wheel with some green buffing compound on it. This is as high of a luster as I really wanted to go with it, so I think it turned out perfect. This is jewelry grade Fordite, so there is no voids or anything. It's perfectly flat and smooth. This material is super cool. I got this from Bradley over at Strange Materials on Etsy. Really nice guy over there. And one thing I will tell you about the Fordite, it's very difficult to work with. When I had my handle slabs, I wanted to true them up and make them square so that they'd lay flat on the spine of the knife. And the problem that I ran into is if I took this slab to the grinder, the second that it would get hot, it would start to warp, you know, and start to take on a warp. Either way that I touched it to the grinder, it would warp this way or warp that way, and it was very difficult to work with. So what I ended up having to do is put it on my granite surface plate right there with a piece of sandpaper and work it by hand until I had it nice and flat, so that I could lay it up against my flat tang here and not have any gaps. You know, it worked out really well. It fit up all the way around really nice and neat, and I'm super pleased with it. You know, it polished out really nice. We have the Dr. Jekyll side and the Mr. Hyde side. Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. This was a complete happy accident. I'm really pleased with this knife. I love it. I absolutely love how the Damascus peeks through at the tip up there. And it's full Damascus on this side. I did sneak in a maker's mark. There's it's hard to see on the Damascus side, but it's definitely there, and it's nice and deep. There we go. You can kind of see it in there. But anyhow, cool build, guys. What do you think of my Go My Gone San My Dr. Jekyll Mr. Hyde knife? Let me know in the comments. Hey, thanks for coming with me. This is a fun build. It's kind of like I said, it was my Go My Gone San My build. It is what it is, guys. Anyhow, do me a favor, tell me what you want to see me build in the comment section. Come with me, watch me build it. Let's build a whole bunch of cool stuff on the channel. I'm going to put a link right here that's going to take you over to some more forging videos so you can go and watch until I publish a new one for you. So here you go. Thanks, guys.